So hello and welcome to the Profit Project interview series, where today we're going to be talking all about Profit First implementation. And today we have got the awesome Ruth Newman from Ruth Newman Architect on the line, who has done exactly that. Welcome, Ruth, to the show today.
Thanks, Craig. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you on board, and I'm looking forward to sharing you sharing your story, because obviously I've been a part of that. Ruth's one of my very first clients that I had when I started rolling out Profit First, and when we do our certification for that, we have to get a couple of beta clients on board, and Ruth was one of the first people that I reached out to, and so I guess for me that's one of the best places to start, Ruth, is we've been working together for 2 to 3 years now. Take us back to sort of 3 years ago. Share a little bit about your business, what you do, how you do it, what your business looked like back then, and I guess that introduction to Profit First from your side of things. I know the story quite well, but interested to hear it from your words, looking back on that 3 years ago.
Okay, well, I guess I was the classic business that was quite successful, and my profit was good and all those sort of things on paper. And I had that one bank account where everything came in and everything went out. And when some of the things like BAS or any of those sort of things came up, it's like, okay, well, let's pay all that and then see what's left over, or pay my team and see what's left over. And often there was nothing left over for a couple of weeks until an invoice was paid, and then we'd roll over and do the next thing and that sort of stuff. So when you started talking to me about Profit First and how that worked and how you were going to roll it out for businesses and just talking about that, I felt like it was something for me and my business that could really work to help me understand, because where financial stuff comes along, I'm a very good architect. So the Profit First thing seemed very simple to me, and a good way of me being able to manage my money. So that's where my interest came from.
Yeah, awesome. And I think I want to touch on that part, being a good architect. I think you're selling yourself short a little bit there. I think more than just good. Share with people, I guess, that aren't necessarily familiar about some of the behind the scenes stuff of architecture and what you do and who you work with as well, because there are many arms to your business and you do work with a varied type of clientele, and it's very obviously project based, and your payments and what you do receive does obviously happen on a timeline and scales, which add some of that complication and those sorts of things. So share a little bit more about the actual business and the different arms to the business that you've got, and how what you deliver, and also I guess how that then relates into the projects and those sorts of things.
So we have quite a varied number of clients. The business started 14 years ago, and our main client then were New South Wales government departments. And government, while they pay, and definitely pay, it is quite a long lead time potentially for those payments. And then over the years, we've sort of branched out into retail, and we've had a few national retailers that we work with over the years, and they also, because they're large companies, have long lead times on their payments. And the payments are progress payments as well. So you do a little bit of work and they pay you, and then you wait, and then maybe you go for council approval, and so the things change a little bit as to how long between payments and that sort of stuff. And then we've, over the years, started doing residential work as well. And then that's a whole different thing, because it's people spending their own money rather than spending other people's money. And so that can get difficult as well. So trying to manage the money going out, the money going in, and, the late payments and all of those sort of things is obviously a challenge. But it's great doing all of these different things. And it's been particularly great in this at the moment, because we've got a varied number of clients. We haven't niched ourselves so much, despite everybody telling us we should. So retail obviously is very, very slow at the moment, and our retail clients aren't coming to us at all, but our residential clients are. So the way that our business works has actually turned out to be really good. And Profit First is just helping that and helping me manage the processes.
Yeah, that's a great summary of what you do, and I guess just the diverse nature of both the actual business itself and an indication as to how those flows of cash do actually work around the business. And obviously you've got the whole process there of the approval process, which, you know, obviously holds things up and throws different timings. And obviously within our Profit First rollout, we sort of try to factor some of those things in. Is obviously getting some payments in that aren't necessarily your money, that's money that comes in and then goes out to pay some council approvals and all those sorts of things. That was, I guess, one of the early challenges that we discussed. With the rollout and how you've implemented, you know, it's never, you know, bang, we implement it and off it goes and everything's just smelling roses. There are challenges. How did you find some of the challenges that you've experienced, even with the rollout and those sorts of things?
I think the rollout of the system wasn't particularly difficult at all, other than my bank and whether they could cope with the system and that sort of stuff. So I find with the bank that I am using, I have to transfer money all back into one account and then transfer it all back out rather than being able to transfer directly between accounts, which is a bit of a pain. But once I've got used to that, it's quite good. We also have a situation within our business where we might invoice for council fees or for engineering fees or things like that, that actually isn't my money to then spend. It's my money or it's the money that I need to give to somebody else when they give us an invoice later. And I might have invoiced the client even though I haven't had the invoice from the engineer. So part of that for me was to set up an extra account that I've called other people's money, but that means I don't spend the money that's not mine, and that just goes into another account as well. And that's worked out quite well from a business point of view, and I'm sure other businesses would have things like that they would have to cater for that aren't particularly the profit first way of doing it, but it's a good way for them to manage the money coming in and out and know what's happening, and rather than having it all in one big bucket and then discovering that you don't have the $10,000 to pay the engineer or something. So that's been good. I think the hardest thing for me has been the flexibility of the bank, but I've just worked that out and done it. So
yeah, I think it's a very common challenge that people find, and it does become that conversation around what's the most pain is it to go, hey, I can work out what a workaround may be, versus, hey, what's the pain to move banks and go elsewhere and do those sorts of things. And every business owner, you know, some banks, they're set up great and they work well for them. Other people definitely have that exact same challenge that you've got. And I guess something else that you definitely touched upon there as well, which is, you know, I think something common that people see and find with Profit First is that, you know, Profit First at the end of the day is a nice framework, but also there is actually a whole lot of flexibility within that as far as how you roll out individually. And, you know, what you talked about there, the other people's money side of things, you know, that definitely falls within, you know, certain aspects of the way Profit First talks about having separate accounts for different purposes, and definitely falls into that. So, yeah, so that's great. And touching back on that bank accounts one, definitely a very common challenge that people have. And it's one of usually the early conversations that I know I have with every type of client. But so thinking about those, and, you know, you got the bank accounts and you worked that out and took a little bit of time to really refine that down and like, but I guess fast forward, you know, 2 years, 2.5 years, actually, I'll take a step back. Fast forward 3 months, 6 months after implementing Profit First. Can you remember that first feeling of what the benefits you started to see and what the outcome was in that very early stage, kind of that, even that first 3 months, 6 months?
I guess the early ones that I really noticed was money there to pay myself more. That was a really big one. And I gave myself quite a couple of pay rises quite early, probably within the first 12 months or something, which was very good. And then with the account that is actually the profit account, that where you can actually see that you are making a profit, that one's really good as well. To just be able to see that and manage to pay everything that you need to pay and have these accounts sitting there. The trick to having all of it, though, is being able to keep up with the invoicing so that the money's coming in, because there's no point having all the accounts to put the money in if there's no money coming in. So it's like anything within business, if you're not doing the invoicing and doing it quickly, then Profit First doesn't work either. So you really need to keep ahead of that. That's probably my biggest lesson that I've learnt, particularly over the holiday periods. We found it quite difficult this year over December, January, and that was just because of the nature of our clients at the time and all that sort of stuff. So that sort of put us back a little bit, but it's just a case of being aware of that and knowing what we have to do and then keep going. And I think one of the big highlights is when you get that quarterly BAS and you can just go, yep, there's the money, pay it. And then sometimes there's money still left in that particular account and you can pay your super and do all those things. There's still some money that then you can transfer into another account that may need it or may not need it. It could go into your profit account or it could go into your operational account and you can use the money. So it's, I think the highlight is knowing that you've got extra money in places that so you've just done your percentages for 3 months or something and then discover that actually I don't need to pay that much tax. So there's some extra money in the system and it's all there instead of you not even being aware it's there.
Yeah, that's so true. And I'm glad you touched upon 3 great ones there. As a part of that, the things that you noticed even in the early days that just from starting to implement the extra money in your pocket, the tax side of things, and then the power of seeing that money in that profit account. It's yeah, and I can recall back, and I think the first thing that I do recall was the first time you had a BAS payment to be paid, and it was like, I've got this amount of money in my bank. How good's this? And that was, I was hoping that would come up because that was the one that remembered in my mind, and that was for me that sort of symbolised a lot. And I think fast forward sort of 3 years now, and I know a little while ago we kind of just did a bit of a review of the overall progress of your business as a whole, and we looked at the profit and loss, which we don't necessarily look at a huge amount, but we did have a look at that a little bit, and we looked at your expenses and your revenue as to where you've gone over the time. And obviously, while not all attributable to profit first, there's obviously some great growth within that period. But I thought it was an interesting one to cover off, and your business is an interesting example. That I've heard people say in the past, profit first comes in, and it's about coming in and reducing expenditure and doing those sorts of things. Do you have any comments and thoughts around that?
I don't think it's about reducing expenditure. I think it's more being aware of where it's going. And so because it's in the different buckets of money, it's a little bit like the barefoot investor idea that people are using for their personal lives. So it's just knowing where your money's going and understanding that you need to control that sometimes. But no, it's not about not spending the money. I've actually used some of my profit money to pay for my flights and everything to go on a charity bike ride in Thailand, and that was a big highlight for me, just having the money there, just pay it, it's done. And then another time I actually used it to buy myself a new bike to be able to train for that bike ride. So it's not about cutting down or doing whatever. It's just being aware of what you're doing. And if you can see that it's a waste of money, well, then stop spending it.
Yeah. So true. And again, I think you've got a really good example when we looked at some of those numbers. I think it was about 6 months ago now, and we looked at the results and year on year sort of components. And yes, your expenses had gone down a little bit, but it was actually only a fairly small percentage. But your revenue had gone up, and as we talked about it, I find, and again, I think you're a really good example of how that sort of happened. Is that you became more conscious. It's exactly what you just talked about, more conscious and aware of where you're spending and how you're spending, and therefore you start to spend where it matters. You start to be really conscious on that whole return on investment idea, and I think that's been great to see as an outside observer, and that's where people seem to have, and I think you're in that boat as well. Is it frees up the mind to really focus on the cool stuff that you're really good at in doing what you do, and being able to get clients on board, great projects, improve profit margins, and all those sorts of things. So that's great as to what you've shared there. So I guess in wrapping up, I always like to ask ask people that have implemented profit first, if you sort of had one tip for people out there that aren't implementing, or sitting on the fence, or seen it, heard it, around sort of profitability and cash flow, you know, is there something that you sort of sticks in your mind, or you sit there and you go, there's one thing you'd like to share, what would it be?
I think I kind of already have, is to keep on top of your invoicing and keep on top of your debtors. That would be my big thing. The debtors one's a particular issue for me with this COVID thing, and it's out of my control because of the COVID situation, but try and keep on top of that, and as long as you're on top of both of those, then the rest of it just works as easily as it possibly can. There's no challenge to it at all. If you've got those two things sorted, then everything else just works.
Yeah, that's gold. That's a nice tip, because yes, it definitely impacts that money going into that revenue bank account, and obviously if there's a nice constant stream of that coming in, then that obviously helps run through the system wonderfully. So really appreciate your time today, Ruth. As always, love catching up, and I always like to say, share, if people do want to, you know, check out the awesome work that you do and are looking in the market for awesome architects and the like, where can people find you? As I look over your shoulder there, obviously the website's there, which is great. Obviously ruthnewman.com.au, so recommend that. But where else can people find you?
You can find us on Facebook, just search for Ruth Newman Architect, and Instagram, same thing, Ruth Newman Architect. And we have a LinkedIn profile as well, so you can find us there if you want.
Awesome. So highly recommend going and checking out Ruth and all the quality stuff that she does with her business and her team there. And yeah, really appreciate you having the time and sharing your profit first journey with us today, Ruth. We'll catch you all next time.
Okay, thank you.